Please join me in welcoming Derek Walcott.
Thank you. I'm going to read some selections from an unpublished book. I don't want to say too much about it, except when you do these things, it's like somebody asking you, send me a 2-page outline, and you're supposed to summarize what you've been working on. Or can you say what you want to do in 3 sentences or 2? Every year I get invited to Italy, and that's great. Everybody loves Italy. But what I'm really trying to assess is what are the changes that are happening in me with these visits. What does it mean to compare? And why should one compare, but one does, Milan to a St. Lucian fishing village? Because I love both, and if one loves one more, then you're starting to get into a little bit of trouble. One can say that you can accommodate both feelings. But for me, being a Caribbean person, it goes more profoundly than that. Because it does mean the threat. For someone else, it might be the joy of. For me, it is almost the threat of conversion. Because conversion, in a sense, means abandonment. If you make comparisons, then somebody wins. If you try to be neutral, then it doesn't get anywhere. I think the epiphany of it all is, if it were possible to balance both and make them one, then I don't know what you'd have. I don't know who I would be. And that's the question, I think, that is in the theme of the poem. It's untitled so far. That's a curious phase of things when you think you've finished a work and you look around for a title. So the other day I saw a title which I won't say, and I said, oh, that's terrific, but somebody else has thought of it. And then I thought, well, there are a lot of books that have that kind of title, so I don't think I can do that. So I'll have to find something really terrific, and I think I'm expected to find something really exotic, because I'm from the Caribbean. I can't write something, that's not colorful. I don't feel too colorful, and I don't feel like titling things. But I have to eventually. So when the book does come out, you can nod and say, aha, I knew that, The first section that I'm going to read from describes coming into Italy. And everybody here is invited to groan, oh God, not another Italy poem, right? Just remember that it's more than just a trip for me. It's something that does have to do with a radical alteration of how I feel. Blessed are the small farms conjugating Horace, and the olive trees twisted as Ovid's syntax. Virgilian twilight on the hides of cattle and the small turreted castles on the Tuscan slopes. To live in another language with the swallow's wings, Calydon beating over the rye, shadow on the barley. Between the peeling farms and the rusted poplars, the bright air full of drunken insects, the Pavigilum veneris, Latin leaping to life as the train glides into dividing Florence. Outside Firenze, the hill offered itself, erect flame cypresses and an ochre castle sepulchral towards evening, a star's first spark. Over the red-brown tiles of roofs through the olive grove, dusk delicate as an old gentleman with mottled hands and watery eyes, our host, diabetic, dying, my double. And here again a digit in Rome's bustle, a phrase as casual as a cape tossed over the shoulder of a dimming pilgrim in an obscure, anonymous altarpiece. Those serene, soft mountains, those tacit gorges, that was Abruzzo. I remembered Abruzzo from A Farewell to Arms with the soft young priest who invites Frederick Henry there after the war. And perhaps Frederick Henry got there. Whether or not, here it was now, with small hill towns on the ridges where it could be infernally cold. The precise light-defined bright quarries. It looked incorruptible, like the faith of the young priest, its paint still wet. It spun past saying, "You swore not to forget." Fighting and the rattle of gunfire in the mountains, gone without echo. Only the tight, fine towns, church, tower, or spire, the steep rust roofs revolving slowly past the carriage window. And why now? Wind folded the deck chairs on the esplanade, slumming them shut. A detached striped umbrella somersaulted over the sand. A dish rag sky. We drove through the wet sunlight into Pescara. Then the weak sunshine strengthened steadily, and color came back into the sea's face. The waitress moved among the afternoon tables, setting and straightening the dinner linen. A girl with jet hair, black as her skirt, red mouth and cheeks that were brightening now with the sun and the drying sand. The sky was Caribbean. The breakers tumbling in from the Adriatic. The folded beach umbrellas like a Chinese army waiting for the drop of the emperor's sword. Through the dirty glass of the hotel in Pescara, a mixture of spume and grime, a quiet like an armistice, the clink, the small weapons of cutlery, the rumors darkening like smoke over Albania, the palms on the seafront ceaselessly tossing, the traffic with slow headlights on, inching through the rain. And oh, it was lovely coming through the mountains, castles on the far crests, the flashing olives and the halted infantry of the pines. All the wars were over or far away. But the young woman on the bus, past whose beauty the pines, the olives and small castles swept in the clarified window, and whose sadness I thought was like a holiday resort town in the rain, the lights of her grey eyes like its wet traffic, whose name, she told me, was a mountain of flowers, but one that was quite common in her country, spoke softly as the drizzle on Pescara's shorefront of Serbia and its sorrow, of the horrors she had seen on the sidewalks of Kosovo, and how it was all war, the fault of the Jews. Yet she was beautiful. I learned this after. I learned it from the drizzle on the car lights of Pescara inching through the dark, and the folded umbrellas, quiet as banners, and the long brown hair that bracketed her face. Leon, Yehuda, Joseph, the war was their fault. But it was lovely coming through the mountains that they said were the Apennines when I asked their names. This passage is based on an exhibition of photographs that I saw, which you may recognize. I think the thing for a Caribbean person in Europe is how naturally, easily, and inevitably Europeans accept the horror of their history. We have horror in our history too, but compared to European horror, it's really second rate. At least that's what Europeans make you feel. The tidal motion of refugees, not the flight of wild geese. The faces in freight cars, haggard and cold-eyed, particularly the peak stare of children, the huge bundles crossing bridges, axles creaking, as if joints and bones were audible, the dark stains spreading on maps whose shapes dissolve their frontiers, the way that corpses melt in a lime pit, or the bright mulch of autumn is trampled into mud, and the smoke of a cypress signals Saxon house, and those without trains, without mules or horses, those who have the rocking chair and the sewing machine heaped on a human cart, a wagon without horses, for horses have long since galloped out of their field back to the mythology of mercy, back to the cone of the orange steeple piercing clouds over the lindens and the stone bells of Sunday over the cobbles, those who rest their hands on the sides of carts as if they were the flanks of mules, and the women with flint faces, with glazed cheekbones, with eyes the color of duck ponds glazed over with ice, for whom the year has only one season, one sky, that of the rooks flapping like torn umbrellas. All have been reduced into a common language, the homeless, the province-less, to the incredible memory of apples and clean streams, and the sound of milk filling the summer churns. Where are you from? What was your district? I know that lake. I know the bear and its inns. I believed in its mountains. Now there is a monstrous map that is called nowhere, and that is where we're all headed. Behind it there is a view called the province of mercy, where the only government is that of the apples, and the only army the wide banners of barley, and its farms are simple. And that is the vision that narrows in the irises and the dying and the tired whom we leave in ditches before they stiffen and their brows go cold as the stones that have broken our shoes, as the clouds that grow ashen so quickly after dawn over palm and poplar in the deceitful sunrise of this, your new century. Among ragged palms and pastel balconies, this miracle happened to me in Pescara, by accident or by coincident stars. In the hotel lobby of a forgotten name, mine will be forgotten by another. I was reading a paperback of the life of Nora, J. Joyce's wife, from which there was now a film with a photo of the actress on the cover, a film at the film festival in that city with its furrowed bay by a long esplanade, met the black-haired Irish beauty playing her and told her, and I showed her the book to our mutual astonishment, also her friends, another young Irishwoman with red hair, her beauty's guardian, I guessed, and I made of this something more oracular and fated. Although all it meant was that we were both here and at the festival. But it was more, perhaps. I liked to believe that she was Nora, and not that I was Joyce, but to be reading the paper with her picture in the basic salty furniture of the lobby while the seaside light made her skin manifest with Irishness, with none of Nora's tartness, but with her accent, seemed to me a miracle of which, as evidence of that epiphany, while the rain stopped on the shining esplanade, I have in her warm hand, untouched by fame, the scrawl of seaweed on the unprinted sand, and a far rain traveling to the other shore, the lilting whisper of her signature. Genoa. Seaside hotels with their salt balconies, whose iron flowers rust with artifice, facing the pompous, cavernous railway station, utilitarian monument of the fascists. Down the serrated summer coast from Nice to Genoa, the sea's tinfoil striations are close to home. The cedar's agitation repeats the rustling of reversible almonds, the cheek warmed by a freshly ironed sky, scent of scorched grass, and through the limp leaves the Mediterranean doing its laundry. Then somewhere from the window of your eye a flag lifts a corner of the afternoon, and an iron swarm of vespers hurtles by the discoverer's statue, then fades round the sun. All these remembered women melt into one, when my small words like sails must leave their haven, the cliffs of shoulders burnt brown by the sun, and wild jet hair, the banner of the raven. O Genoan, I come as the last line of where you began, to the port whose wharf holds long shadows and silence, under the weeds of the prow, nodding and riding with a wavering map of America. Droplets of oil conjugate themselves into rainbows. The greased rag blurs the portholes and the moorings sway until Genoa slides past, a fog of spires absorbing the gull's return. Hands close like wings in the aisles of the cathedral. The palms close in the psalms, and the choir's O widens and deepens in the wave's trough, in the interminable metronome, grave and cradle, until over the crest there is a fresher crest. Against preliminary reefs, the surf exploding with light. Lice sing in the timber, and the sponges open. In Genoa, I loved our balcony. Below me, the white stone statue of the admiral kept quiet in the navigating traffic. The open gate of the Mediterranean, the sea. This was the swell that heaved the caravel's sigh at the remorseful future that lay ahead. In the flagged park close to the railway station, this is the procedure into dispossessions. Conglomerate masonry, the shaft light on brick in the old quarter, squeaking pulleys lifting the sails of laundry across the gulf of inconsolable alleys, the pigeons' dandruff powdering the hair and shoulders of creased statues who forgot what they were famous for, probably the whitewashed admiral also. There is no rest. There is the insomnia of sculptures, the snow's nightmare, the smell of history I carry in my clothes like smoke, the smell of a canal in Amsterdam, the asphalt smell of a washed street in Pescara, the sun-on-stone smell of the hills of Tuscany, flowers in the weed between the rocks, wild flowers, the train passing their hosannas on the slopes, and the soul in exile sliding into its station, into history, the muse of shutters and cabinets, and the closed cathedral of the gramophone. Envy of statues. This is how it grew. Every day from the hotel en route to class, I passed my rigid, immortal friend, the general, on his morose green horse, still there on weekends. The wars were over, but he would not dismount. Had he died catapulted in some charge in some euphonious battle? The bronze charger was lathered, streaked with sweat in the Sunday sun. We had no such memorials on the island. The only cavalry were the charging waves. Peace widened the empty avenue in Milan. Who knows what war he fought in, and whose shot tumbled his whinnying steed? Envy of fountains. Poor hero on his island in the swirl of traffic, denied the solace of an umbrageous linden or chestnut with bright meadows through its leaves. Envy of columns, calm, envy of bells. Left-handed light on Sunday on a square, the Duomo with long shadows, where clamoring bells shake exultation from blue, virginal air, squaring off columns, De Chirico parallels, and where the soundlessly snorting big bold horse whose head, lowered and drooping, means the death of its rider, holds a far longer breath, longer than ours on our traffic island. The widening love of Italy growing stronger against my will, with sunlight in Milan. We still expect presences, no matter where, to sit again at a table watching the luminous clatter of the great mall in Milan. There, that was him,
there in an olive raincoat, like a cork, like a leaf on a clear stream carried along by the crowd from the edge to the center and melting along into them. Joseph, absence's emblem, the solid specter of your grief. Yes, you can still see his tonsure, his ascetic halo till somewhere bars it, a hat or a sign. Then the mall fills with phantoms serenely hurrying to the same exit, the arched doorways of a sunlight almost celestial. I silently shout their names, but I am inaudible to them since they outnumbered me, since they are now in the same procession as my brother. To them I am the phantom and they are the real ones, their names still claiming them over the noise of waiters clearing the tables of their possessions, of the crumbs of bread and the glasses of recent blood still clouded with their one breath, the breath that I too will leave in a water glass to condense when I join them, following the pale tonsure of a moon that fades into the glare of dawn outside the intricate and immense cathedral and our terrestrial traffic. The changing light within the circumference of the cathedral and its immense and bustling piazza and a long mall of cafes and shops. I saw him, Joseph, because I needed to, because a lengthening absence requires its apparition, lost, then returned again by the frothing crowd. I was not ready for the stone-webbed and incantation-hallowed intricacies of the altars, an architecture like frozen fury, demanding a surrendering awe. Yet the worst happened. I started to miss Europe. My memory was developing a vocabulary of arches and aqueducts, of a more muted light, not merely of skin and hair, of eyes washed after a light rain, of bridges and brickwork, but of how easily I could say Carrara without the evocation of a culture. The fair was in how easily the common fitted like an arm into a sleeve, how dangerous the ease of the enemy. No envy now, not even fear, but a great indifference to history, neither abhorred nor hallowed. I now moved in her in an intimacy with which one judged the kept love, immured, nevertheless, an open secret. This tyranny, this repetition of an empire perhaps came naturally to a native even in my dissolution. It was hair and eyes, it was Pompeian red down an ochre street and laundry fluttering out of Guardi, but no, not the names and not just the summer heat that made it so much home. It was more home than I needed. But this was nothing new. Others had melted, others had scored their love, but they shared race and history, huge abstractions that caught in the light of a linden leaf, that hung in the silent growl of a stone lion, but also in a linen bodice and a clasp. Was my conversion so inevitable? Lions and fountains, the fountain's liquid claws have pinned you also. You are history's prey, the slave of poetry, a traitor to your tribe. You are the memory of a prophecy whose language is your birthmark, salop. The core of all your discontent is envy. Centuries are packed into a long perspective of books and avenues in the hush of a felt, velvet and leathery silence of yellowed wisdom riddled by silverfish. Diagrams of aqueducts, charts of the nervous system, volumes that yawn open in meadows of astronomy, dials of stars, the lightless asterisks of constellations, until your soul stands hushed, since none of this is your inheritance, even less than that of a white clochard on a park bench opposite the National Museum, or in the shadow of a bronze horseman, or in the busy flutter of foraging pigeons. They are all one, the aisles of the Vatican, the stalks of Alcala, the saw of serrated Alps, all one, in that they populate a backward terror. They darken imagination like a cathedral's bulk, a palace's tower. And poor infected pilgrim, you wander now among their tombs and marbles, portraits, mausoleums, tapestries, shining in the sweat of fever, touched to your febrile heart, your brimming eyes, your wheezing exhalations by this disease called Europe, fever bright, elate, resisting all the symptoms of a passion you once mocked, younger, but you have caught for rest Esperanza in Madrid, Venice in Roberta, and the Alps. No, if it were the best affection only, it would be quite sad. But this is something much more monumental, shrouded, abysmal, a severance, a denial whose punishment is envy, its sweet grief. Now has this settled on my whitening hair, envy of grey, envy of subtleties. So the word sizzly shimmers with poplars, with adjectival aspens in the spring sun's stuttering utterance. What if genetically some Flemish blood pushed through the veined cracks in the dry earth, springing in drought as an ancestral claim? The doors are open, the house breathes, and I feel a balm so heavy and a benediction so weightless that the past is just blue air and cobalt motion lanced with emerald, and sail flax and the dove's continuous complaint about repletion, its swollen note of gratitude. All incantation is a monody of thanks to the sky's motionless or moving altars, even to the faint drone of that silver insect that is the morning plain over Martinique. While, take this for what you will, the frangipani that for dry months contorted, crucified in impotence or barrenness endured, has come with pale pink petals and blades of olive leaves, parable of my longing, my silver age. From the salt brightness of my balcony I look across to the abandoned fort. No history left, just natural history, as a cloud's shadow subtilizes thought. On a sloped meadow lifted by the light, the Hessians spun like blossoms from the immortelle. The tattered pennons of the sea almond fluttered to the spray-white detonations of the lilac against blue, the hue of a grenadier. Dried pods of the flamboyant rattled their sabers, and a mare's whinny across the parched pastures launched his white skulls of sails across the channel. The ships of a boy's fleet launched in a canal, or shredded treaties of some forgotten rain. These are the subtleties of the known sea: lime, emerald, lilac, cobalt, ultramarine. Prodigal, what were your wanderings about? The smoke of homecoming, the smoke of departure. The earth grows music and the tubers sprout to Cézanne's singing. Rainwater, fresh patois in a clay carafe, a clear spring in the ferns. And pure things take root. The sweet potato vines irradiate the furrows on the slopes of Mont Sion. Under the blue bulk of the mountain, as the acacias sweeten their thorns, and leaves learn their lesson like children's voices as she leads them in song. And what is that flower, so tiny, so tenacious in the fissures of Piailles? These are phrases in the vase of her throat, the smoke and honeycomb, the hive in the heart that hums the prodigal's welcome, the drift from the charcoal pit, and the fragrance from a kerosene tin boiling with dasheen. These are the scudding syllables of clear river fish, and the twee-twee weaving its credulous nest from little blades of grass. The blue plunge into corridors of smoke through columns of palmists over a valley whose name is a lost echo. Ah, Mabouya. Sing, earth-cracked muse, harp of the rainbow, over dry doors and cedar leaves blowing in a yard like the crowd near the Duomo. The rocking heart is its own cradle, and cities crackle in the heat of the stoked embers. Genoa, Firenze, as a blackbird shoots from a branch into heartbreak, straight as the empty highway into Cartagena, or the sudden flight of memory that took me back to the pool of the Dobeon River where I almost drowned, and over whose brown rings stands the ghost of my boyhood and the brother I have lost. Compare Milan. Compare a glimpse of the Arno with this riverbed congealed with rubbish. I have seen Venice trembling in the sun, shadow-shawled Granada and the cork groves of Spain. Across the coined Thames, the grey light of London, the drizzles sweeping Pescara's esplanade, and stone dolphins circling the basin of a fountain. But on the sloping pastures behind Gros Piton, in the monumental shadow of that lilac mountain, I saw for a moment the terrestrial paradise. O altitudinal and my fear of heights, but in Zermatt it was clear, dry, cold. That is the delight of skiers and of angels, over riven crevices where the old snow was packed and the new snow almost blinded. Not different, the one celestial real geography. And why waste all that envy when they take as much pride in their suffering as in their cathedrals, a vanity indifferent to proportions? I have seen my shift from empire to empire to empire. I should have known that I would wind up beached as I began, on the blazing sand, rejected by the regurgitating billows, retreating with their long, contemptuous hiss for these chaotic sentences of seaweed plucked by the sandpipers, darting concentration, the moral of its small, white happiness. Time that gnaws at bronze lions and dolphins, that shrivels fountains, had exhausted him. A cupola in Milan inhaled him like incense. Abruzzi devoured him. Firenze spat him out. Rome chewed his arm and flung it over her shoulder for the rats in the catacombs. Rome took his empty eyes for the sockets of the Colosseum. Italy had eaten him. Its bats at Vespers navigated her columns with an ancient elation. A hand in San Marco's font aspersed him with foul canal water. Then bells tossed their heads like bulls, and their joy rattled the campaniles as innumerable pigeons settled on the square of his forehead. His kidneys were served in a modest hotel in Pescara. A fish mimicked his skeleton in salty Amalfi, until after a while there was nothing left of him except this, a name cut on a wall that soon from the grime of indifference grew indecipherable. The last section deals with the experience of seeing dolphins coming out of the water in St. Lucia. We were headed steadily into the open sea, immeasurable and unplummetable fathoms too deep for sounding or for any anchor. The waves quick-running crests. We were between the pale blue phantoms of Martinique and St. Vincent on the iron rim of the immense horizon. The farther we went out, the white bow drumming, plunging and sharing spray, the wider my fear, the whiter my spume shot cowardice as the peaks receded, rooted on their separating world, diminishing in the idea of home, but still the prow pressed stubbornly through the gulfs and the helmsman kept nodding in their direction through the glass between the front deck and the wheel, their direction meaning that we could not see, but he knew they were there, from talking on the radio to the other boat that lay ahead of us, towards which we plunged and droned, a white slip of another smaller cruiser, convinced by his smiling that we would breach them soon. Dolphins, the helmsman said, you will see them playing. But this was widening into mania. There were only the crests that looked to their leaping. No fins, no arching backs, no sudden freeze, no school today. But the young captain kept on smiling. I had never seen such belief in legend, and then a fin hint. Not a crest, and then splaying open under the keel and racing with a bow, the legend broke water and was reborn. Her screams of joy in my heart drumming harder, and the pale blue islands were no longer phantom outlines, and the elate spray slapped our faces, and everything came back as it was between the other islets, but those with our own names. Sometimes a fin shot up, sometimes a back arched and re-ended the racily running waves under which they raced. I saw their wet brown bodies gunning seaward, more brown than golden despite the name Dorado. But I guessed in the wet light their skins shone too raw, too quiet to be miraculous, too strange to quiet my fear. The skittering fish from the first line of the open poem held and held until the school was lost. The prodigal's home was the horizon while my own peaks loomed so consolably again, the roads, the roofs of Soufriere in the wet sunlight, I watched them come. I had gaped in anticipation of an emblem carved at a fountain's pediment from another sea. And when the dolphins showed up and I saw them, they arched the way thoughts rise from memory. They shot out of the glacial swell like skiers hurtling themselves out of that alpine surf with its own crests and plungings, spuming slopes from which the dolphins seraphically soared, to the harps of ringing wires and humming ropes, to which my heart clung, and those finished hopes that I would ever see you again, Roddy, my brother. And yet elation drove the dolphins' course, as if both from and to you. Their joy was ours, and had there been a prophecy that said, wait, on a day of great delight you will see dolphins, or in the ashes and embers of a wrecked sunset, the same voice, falling as quietly as a flag, said, before the constellations arranged their chaos, those drifting cinders are angels, see how they soar. I would not have believed in them, being too old and skeptical of the fury of one's life, determined benedictions, but they were here, angels and dolphins, second first, and always certainly, steadily on the bright rim of the world, getting no nearer or nearer, the more the boughs wedge shuddered towards it, prodigal, that line of light that shines from the coming shore. Thank you.
Take a few questions. Mr. Walcott, I'll take a few questions. Audrey will hand you the microphone if you raise your hand. Thank you, it's great.
Because this is being webcasted, we'd like to ask you to speak clearly into the microphone with your question, please.
Questions, comments?
Thank you for that beautiful reading. I just want to ask you, what actually inspired you to write this apart from your traveling? Thank you.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat it?
Sorry, my name is Rosemary Ebulu. I'm from university in Africa, and I just want to, it's so beautiful, but I want to know what actually inspired you or what influenced you to write this. It's really a wonderful piece. Thank you.
I don't know, we have to deal with black people, as black people, with concepts of beauty, thorough concepts of beauty, beauty of the soul, the beauty of the body, the trust in our own beauty. You go to a museum and you're not represented there, really. What does that mean? You don't exist, or you're not able to do great works of art. I'll tell you, the horrors you have as a colonial are very quiet ones. I remember a long time ago, and I'm confessing to a violation of my mind, I had gone to a lot of museums, but there was an African exhibition, I don't know where it was, maybe at the Met, and I didn't want to go. I felt I couldn't see anything by Africans that would equal stuff that I'd looked at. Michelangelo, whoever you want. And that is a condition of what the result of the way I was brought up. Because everything that I looked at belonged to somebody else. I was not a part of my experience. And then I went, and naturally it was great. Obviously it was great because there were these warriors, small warriors,
beautifully carved with nails on the armor and stuff like that. So it was staggering. But the point is, that question that I had, that hesitancy of saying, as somebody brought up in a colonial situation that says, well, you know, beauty is only achieved by some cultures, and that is a different kind of beauty. It's not a different kind of beauty. If you start to make those distinctions, then you're confirming all the values that are imposed on you. I'm just giving you that as an example, that the self-contempt that happens in colonialism is a very profound and subtle thing. The first time I saw a black pilot, I thought, I don't want to fly with a black guy flying a plane. And we must all confess to that, because that's what we feel, that's what we've been taught. It sounds like you had that experience. Well, yes, it's in St. Lucia or in Trinidad, black women weren't allowed to handle money. Cashiers. It's horrible to think of that. That was what it was. That, you know, if a light-skinned woman could be a cashier, but you couldn't, for some reason, whether it's they or mainly us, you couldn't think that a black woman would handle money. I didn't write the poem because of that, but I think that everything is down there from the experience that I've had as a person growing up in colonial St. Lucia, and I'm not accusing St. Lucia of anything. You know, I'm not accusing anybody of anything except a vague thing called history, which is an easy victim, easy target. I'm just going through that because what I feel I'm trying to examine is the claim that another culture makes and all the complications of that claim. Because there's no point doing what a lot of, I think, Africans do here, which is rejecting anything that is another culture to be protective or to be belligerent or something, because you can't avoid it. You know, from the time you lose your language, you can't avoid it. You've lost it. Or you can gain it another way. I think I'm simplifying, because I think what I'm going after is much subtler than even what you heard. But I think that's still the subject, right? And it's a long subject. It'll take a long time for the average black St. Lucian woman to think that her son is the equal of anything, because there's the struggle of that thing that should not be there, right? And I'm saying that if someone looks at the reasons, then you can come to some very belligerent postures of saying, well, you know, it's their art. It's not their art. That's the hard thing to define. And there is I would honestly rather be in a fishing village in St. Lucia on a good day than be in Italy on a wet day. Make a simple comparison. Right.
Next question. Well, Lou, your last question. Your last question, comment. Don't be shy, friends.
It's okay.
Poet, right here. I mean, just because they want to know about price doesn't mean.
Song. I'm a junior in high school, actually, from the state of Maryland, and I'm up here just visiting colleges. But right now we're studying your poetry in our class, and one of our assignments is to determine a central focus in some of your poems. And
she's in high school in Maryland. She's up here visiting colleges. She's studying your poetry in her class. And one of her assignments is to determine your central focus in your poetry.
So I'm not asking for any answers. But my question is, when you write your poetry, do you make yourself aware of, you know, as I'm writing, I want to stick to a central focus, or do you try to maintain a theme, or do you think after you write your poem one comes about, or that there's any central focus at all?
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
You should come to Harvard. You'll fit right in.
The other thing is, I'm not going to do your homework. No, I think the mystery
and it's a beautiful mystery of trying to write poems, is not being able to say what you're doing, in a way. It's not a matter of being a trance or something as close to that, but it is somehow every time you try to write a poem to make yourself ignorant instead of wise. That's harder than the other thing. Right? Wisdom is for prose writers.
By the way, this is being webcast, so you can bring it into your classroom. The website is on the poster. Next question. Just a couple more. Another question? Right here, Audrey. Here, then there.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear the answer to the first question. But what was your very first thought when you got the Nobel Prize?
Your first thought when you got the Nobel Prize? Money, 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 money.
I won another prize called the W.H. Smith Award. This is a parallel story. So one morning in Boston, I got a call from a good friend who lived in England for years and black but has an English accent. I mean, really upper class Brit accent. So when I got the call, I said, okay, Fred, cut out his shit now, right? Yeah. Because he was saying, I'd like to announce that you've won this, I won the prize, you see. I said, it's ridiculous nonsense. Well, when I got the call this time, I thought, don't do what you just did, because it could be somebody really important. And they might cancel the whole thing, you know. As a matter of fact, the year before, I was in Iowa, and Jory was there when this thing was going to happen, but for some reason they gave it to Nadine. He said contemptuously. I didn't get it that year, but naturally, Nadine, who was beautiful and brilliant, won it. So that in a way there had been some preparation for the phone call that happened. So I said, thank you. I should have said it in a British way, but this was a Swede talking. I'm thanking you? No. But what did happen was I got the call very early in the morning, and I wanted to have breakfast. So I lived around the corner from a Dunkin' Donuts. So I went to Dunkin' Donuts, followed by the press, really. And there's a photograph of me doing something like, what is it? It's like this, right? And what it asininely looks like is that I am saying, you see, I got it. That's not what I was saying. I was saying the donuts are terrific. So anytime you see the photograph, you can put a caption to it.
Peter Sack.
Derek, I was thinking about that phrase that comes up in the first section, more home than I needed. And I'm very moved by this entire enterprise of assessment as one moves towards the possibility of what might constitute a homeland, and the resistance to the idea of home being as balancing the allure of arrival. And I'm wondering, given that it's Italy, and given your vocation as a poet, whether the claims of paganism and Catholicism have any relevance, or if you are going, as that final section suggested, towards the dolphins, towards something that is emblematic of an unorthodox, non-institutional world. I know that's a large question, but if you want to just pick a little piece of it, that would be great.
Well, I thought it would all have been resolved by the time I got to this age, but it isn't. It becomes very much clearer. I mean, what I mean is not only ideas of home, but ideas of language. I mean, suppose I'm part Dutch. Suppose I go to Holland and I look at a Rembrandt or Van Gogh and I say, you know, that's my, these are my people, that's my thing. It's no different than if I went to Africa and said this. People would expect me to say, you go to Africa, yeah, here's your heritage. Well, when you have a split heritage, I don't want to make a kind of complicated claim. More and more things get simpler, and more they get more complicated. I do a lot of work with actors, and I was just working in St. Lucia with some actors doing a video of what could possibly be a film. And they were so natural in their speech, French Creole, I thought, you know, I have to do this thing in French Creole. And a guy just told me, none of that, no, it should be in English. Well, maybe why not? On the other hand, he's right. He was right. So the conflicts that happen in terms of claiming things may not be very important to people outside the question. What is this love of Italy? I mean, it's so old, it's such a cliche, you know, from Browning all the way back to Chaucer or somebody, you know, why should I be going through this at all? It's not just the drama of it, it is something much more profound that I'm trying to examine. Suppose, which is a horrific thought to me, suppose all my life I have been writing in the wrong language. Suppose I should have written in French Creole. Suppose. I don't think I can say that I should have done it because I don't think in French Creole. On the other hand, shouldn't the consequence of my upbringing and the reality of the speech of people in my island, shouldn't that be my language? But it isn't completely my language. I think in English, I've brought up English. It doesn't mean a betrayal. I'm just interested in the conflicts of love that happen when you come from a bilingual society. That's mainly what I'm saying. It's very, you know, come from a bilingual society sounds like an essay, but I'm sorry, that's what I mean.
We have a final comment from Brother Blue, our very own poet. Brother Blue.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Very kind. I can't even express what I want to say to you. Now, I've heard many poets. Here's what, by the way, my disclaimer is I'm just a poor fool. Compared to you, I'm illiterate. But what makes you, to me, unusual and great is your mind, your thought is the dance, the music. You're so understated. It's the other side of over the top. Just standing there, it's so distilled. It's like dry ice compared to a snowflake, or wine that burns rather than the sweet wine of grape juice. In that respect, you're unusual. I listen so hard to you. Then I realize the thought is the dance. The thought is the music. You don't need backup. You need, because it's reduced, it's condensed. It's the night letter. And of all the poets I've heard read, you're the one that makes me listen hard. And I realize the glory, the music, the dance of thought. It makes you, I want to salute you for that and thank you for it.
I can think of no more fitting way.